Hello everyone, welcome to class. Super excited to have you in this course. Eli and I, who are co-teaching this class online, are just thrilled to put you through the paces of what we come to learn to be a really great methodology of being indoctrinated into this messy, crazy world of entrepreneurship and value creation. So what I'd like to do is introduce kind of a framework for the methodology that I use as I'm teaching this material day in and day out here at ASU. So I call this framework a real framework. So it's kind of like, let's keep it real. Let's not mess around. In the world of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of people that think their ideas are brilliant, and as soon as they can raise a ton of money to just go and build and produce the prototype, of course people are going to line up down the block to buy it or access it or to pay for it. So in my experience, and I'm guilty of this myself, having this brilliant aha moment about what it is that I can build in my garage or my basement or my residence hall or my bedroom, wherever it might be, that I've got the most brilliant idea. Nobody's ever thought about this before. I'm going to take the next. I'm living it. I'm breathing it. I'm thinking about it constantly. Put it down on paper. Now I go into the lab. I try to piece it together. I'm trying to get it to be perfect. And then again, I just need a little bit more time or a little bit more money or a little bit more resources to get it to the point where I can show that off to the world, and everybody's going to go nuts because we have the next great thing. It's the next Facebook, the next Tesla, the next Instagram, the next fill in the blank of big innovative brand here, and that's what's cooking inside the brain. That's kind of where most of us start. Some of you in this class might have never thought about innovation or coming up with a new idea ever before. That's totally fine. But I can tell you, moving ahead in your career, that's going to be an expectation. Because there's many companies, some of which have made headlines very recently, like Polaroid, a company that's been around for the past century plus, has recently gone bankrupt, totally out of business, because of their inability to efficiently innovate on a consistent basis. Meaning, if you would come to them after taking this class, let's just say, and you said, hey, you know what, I really have a methodology we can follow to keep up to speed with what the market is demanding of our product or of our brand. That's what these employers are screaming for. So if you don't have this innate desire to bring your own idea, your own creation into the world, that's fine. What I can assure you, though, is your employer, or if you go into work for government or a nonprofit or whatever it is that you want to do, education, you name it, innovation is going to be the currency of the future. So this course, I would argue, is going to be very important to help set you apart from your competition, aka the global economy, because innovation is going to carry everyone forward. So as we're looking for a methodology to follow, a framework to really put all of this into context, this is what I've come to learn over the past decade plus of trying to practice this and make sense of it and do it to the most efficient way possible. So I want to go through each of these components and explain, where this acronym came from. So real, employers and customers expect you to have a real entrepreneurial mindset, regardless of which role you're playing in a startup or in a corporation or in any type of organization or enterprise. The first aspect of that is rigor. So I mentioned this in my introduction to you, introducing myself to you. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of innovators, internal and external, think that the idea is, the hard part, when in fact it's the exact opposite. Ideas are super easy. So in the world of innovation and entrepreneurship, ideas are typically only 1% of the equation. Anybody can have an idea. They're super easy you probably have ideas floating around in your head right now. And a lot of times, especially young innovators, maybe like many of you, or if you're older, that's fine too. Never stops for many people. These ideas keep coming. The key is to put less emphasis on the idea and much more emphasis, in the case of our equation, 99% of the emphasis on execution. So the first lesson of entrepreneurship and innovation, again, in all flavors and all types, is that rigor is an absolute key ingredient. Meaning you have to be willing to work your butt off in order to either validate or reject the usefulness of your idea in the broader marketplace. And we're going to get into this in much, much more detail as we go throughout the course. But the first rule here is set your ego aside. Your idea might be really brilliant, but 9 times out of 10, it's just an idea. The hard work is still yet to come. And if you talk to any successful entrepreneur or innovator, they'll be the first one to tell you that it doesn't happen overnight. The media has done all of us a tremendous disservice in showing this overnight success story of many people that have created the brands and the products and the services that you absolutely love. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires a massive amount of persistence, grit, and ultimately rigor. So entrepreneurship and innovation equals hard work. So get ready for that. The second thing, the E in real, is evidence-based. So again, when ego is involved with this idea, you want to kind of paint this beautiful picture of what's to come. And you want to assume that, again, once you build this amazing product or service, people are going to come line up down the block and want to buy it from you or access it in some way. When in fact, you need to go out and collect evidence to prove or disprove that that is actually the reality before you spend any time building it. And this goes especially for our engineers in the class. You have the skills and the chops to actually go and build a product, but that's actually not the first step. You want to go out and collect evidence to make sure that you're attempting to build something that the market is actually ready to see value in. So evidence-based kind of approach comes from the world of medicine and many other disciplines. It's a very scientific approach. And so science is a key piece of this, making sense of a very messy and creative process of entrepreneurship and innovation. So our currency of moving from idea towards ultimately product market fit and changing people's lives for the better is data, evidence, fact, not hypotheses and, great stories and great visual. Hey, this is what's going to happen if we can do X, Y, and Z. You've got to collect that data. Next, you want to always have a bias towards action. You want to be action oriented. So you want to put your ego aside and be willing to release a really low fidelity version of your concept in a sketch drawing or a really crudely constructed duct tape together prototype, and I'll show you examples of this later in the class. But you need a bias towards action, and this comes from this methodology called design thinking. So if you're unfamiliar with design thinking, you might want to do a quick Google search and learn a little bit more about that. We're not going to spend a ton of time in this class on design thinking, but it's really divorcing yourself, your ego, from this ability to collect data, to collect evidence as quickly and rapidly and iteratively as you possibly can. So always have that bias towards action. And a historic example of that is General Patton from World War II. He famously said, "No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy." So instead of spending a ton of time writing a 50-page business plan with very little data to back up the assumptions you're making, just go out there and try to sell a really low fidelity prototype and see what happens. And then you can pivot from there. And then finally, learning. Insight is your number one goal in the realm of managing this messy process of innovation and entrepreneurship. Again, either as a startup founder or as an entrepreneur within an organization. So you are always looking for insight to, like I said earlier, either validate or, more importantly, actually reject some of the hypotheses and some of the ideas that are floating around in your head. Because if you can reject ideas through iterative learning and running experiments, that's going to save you a ton of time. I mentioned as I introduced myself to you in this class that I spent 3 years working on a crappy kind of ed tech startup company that ultimately didn't have any legs out in the marketplace. And if I had followed my own advice using this framework much earlier in that process, I would have had at least 2 years of my life back where I could have been experimenting with another potentially brilliant idea that is constantly popping into my head. So always be ready to learn from the data you're collecting and be ready to change course or pivot as you collect data and learn from the marketplace what is truly a pain point that we as innovators can go out and solve. So let's do it.